Stand up if you play a sport. Okay, you can sit down. Now stand up if you've ever had an injury from your sport. Okay, sit down. Now stand up if you've ever been told to walk it off. Less of you, that's good. Okay, sit down. Lastly, stand up if you've ever just ignored an injury to continue playing your sport. Okay, you can sit down. That was enough exercise for now anyway. Now, let's think about it. How long did it take for that injury to recover? A while, I bet. Now, what if I told you that if you had just taken a break from your sport and let your body recover, your injury probably would have recovered faster? I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. Okay. This is Jared. Jared, can you stand up? Give everyone a wave. Can you give everyone a wave? Maybe stand up. So, for the people who don't know, Jared was our English teacher this year. He's a perfect example of someone who can't just walk it off. Don't worry, Jared. Maybe one day you'll be able to get up the stairs and make it to our class on time. Hi, my name's Eilidh. Welcome to my Masterworks, Walk It Off. We will further explore injuries in athletes, and today I will be covering types of injuries, defining injuries, common injuries within athletes, the relationship between gender and injuries, and the different types of injuries they may get, as well as the recovery cycle and the cycle of injuries. I've also included a case study to further show that the one-size-fits-all to recovery approaches doesn't really fit. Walk it off is probably the most common phrase I've heard, either when I've hurt myself as a young child or when I would trip, or even now when I hurt myself playing ultimate or dancing. My parents, my coaches, and my dance teachers have all said it to me at one point. They just told me to walk it off, Eilidh, you'll be fine. But what if I can't walk it off? What if walking it off just makes it worse? Injuries can come in all shapes and forms, and they can have very long-lasting impacts that walking off can't just solve. I know firsthand. Many of my friends may know I'm a very athletic person. I love to play ultimate, and I ski a lot in the summer. But my main thing is dance. Dance is a huge part of me, and I don't know where I'd be without it. I do hip-hop, ballet, jazz, contemporary, modern, and I've done so many others as well. It's a really good outlet for me when I get stressed or annoyed or frustrated at things. My studio is a very incredibly welcoming environment, and I'm so grateful for it. But did you know that a key injury for dancers is hip injuries? Yes, I know this because I have one. After 7 years of dancing, 5 days a week, multiple classes a day, I finally have developed hip problems. But I don't think I'll be walking in a walker anytime soon if I take care of myself. I hopefully won't be using one before my mom does. How does this affect me, though? Well, it means I can't really run for long times, and it starts to hurt if I'm running for a while. I also need to stretch a lot. As well as it started to affect my knees, as well as my ankles, and my emotional well-being. I had to stop dancing and playing sports for 2 weeks, and even though it wasn't much, having to sit there and watch people do something I love and not being able to participate really sucked. When I first chose my Masterworks, I thought I was going to do it on different coaching approaches and how they affect athletes. But as I did more research and planning, I decided to focus on injuries and how they affect and impact athletes. I wanted to look at the impacts they have, the recovery process, as well as the emotional well-being they can have on an athlete. I decided to focus on this topic because I have family members whose athletic careers have been majorly impacted and ended because of injuries. I wanted to research the physical, psychological, and emotional impacts of the injuries and how they can be recovered. To start us off, I'll be looking at different types of injuries. Many people will put injuries into one group and call themselves injured. But a lot of people also may know that there are sprains, pulls, fractures, as well as breaks. With a raise of hands, does anyone know what two main categories could be within injuries? No? Okay, that sounds about right. Well, there's traumatic and overuse, and they are what their names sound like. A traumatic injury is when you've been hit by something or some sort of impact has come into contact with you. This could be either falling or physical contact with anything. While an overuse injury is caused by never resting or never letting your body rest. This could be always overloading, not warming up or cooling down. In other words, it's just overusing your body. Traumatic injuries. Traumatic injuries are a lot more common in the sports world as they're injuries that can be easily pinpointed. They're defined quickly, and they're easy to find the right treatment for. Usually, the more severe traumatic injuries can be caused by an obvious collision or accident. These can be very common in sports such as rugby, hockey, and basketball. These can be, since you're moving fast and likely to come in contact with another person. The onset of the pain and the swelling for these types of injuries will reach its peak in the span of 24 to 72 hours after the incident. So the faster you're able to see a doctor or medical professional, the better it would be for your injury. Meanwhile, overuse injuries can be caused by repetitively overworking oneself, overloading on a regular basis. Overuse injuries are much harder to treat, and they are becoming more common in athletes, especially in kids. Could anyone guess why, maybe? No? Okay. Well, this is because their bones are growing faster than their muscles. When the muscle strength and the bone length are mismatched, this can lead to a higher amount of strain on the tendons, ligaments, muscles, and growth plates. Young athletes' muscles have to adapt to mass and size, and strength as well. It may also be perhaps that the body is not fully recovered from a previous or current injury, and you're loading the injured area too soon. Overuse injuries can be caused by training errors. For example, there may be too much intensity in practice, or you're using the improper equipment for training. Take a second to think about a time that you or someone you may know have had an overuse or traumatic injury. Now you have 10 seconds to share that story and experience with the person sitting next to you. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, that's enough sharing for now. Now, I'm gonna start on defining and explaining some injuries. There are an overwhelming multitude of injuries that can exist for athletes, and a lot of them have scientific names. It can be hard for a non-medical professional to understand them. Here are some explanations that could be helpful to you. They can help you understand how they affect you and where they can affect you. Starting off, we have strained tendons. A tendon is a fibrosed connective tissue or a group of fibers that connects the muscle to the bone. A strain or stretching or tearing a muscle is tearing the tendon fibers. These injuries can happen anywhere in your body, but they are most common in your neck, lower back, shoulders, as well as hamstrings. This is because these places in your body can be overloaded, which is what causes a strain. They will create limited movement in the muscle groups that have been strained. Within the diagram above, you're able to see the different grades of the classifications of strains. If you look at the third one on the Achilles, can anyone guess who has that? I'll tell you, it's Jared. Growth plates. Growth plates are cartilage layers located on either ends of the arm bones. Long bones are longer than they are wide. You have two bulky ends of the bones, which are called the neck. For example, long bones in your lower body can include the femur, tibia, and fibula. In the upper body, some examples can include the metacarpals and phalanges. Growth plates can cause swelling, and there can also look like an obvious bump of the injury. These injuries, if they take place in an arm or a leg, they can look like it's bent. Children and teenagers are much more vulnerable to growth plate injuries, as this is because it's the last part of the bone to harden when kids are growing. Growth plate fractures can happen by falling or twisting bones, and with the right medical care, rest, and progressive movement, most growth plate injuries can be healed within a few weeks or in a couple months in a cast. Next, we're moving on to stress fractures. Can anyone tell me what a stress fracture is? No, Pam. It's not caused by hanging out with our class. Stress fractures are associated with overuse injuries, as they can happen when there's too much stress on the bone. The force on the bone is more than it can handle, so it starts to break down. This will create a small crack within the bone, as shown in the diagram. It shows there's a small crack in the bone, which is made from too much pressure on the bone. Stress fractures can be seen often in sports that you need to run and jump often. When you get a stress fracture, it's common that you need to rest and avoid putting pressure on the stress fracture. But it's also recommended that you can do low-impact sports, such as swimming, yoga, rowing, and more. Of course, these can be varied for each person, as their stress fracture may not be located in the same areas. Concussions. Concussions, as you most likely know, are a traumatic head injury. It's very common to get a concussion when you have a bump, jolt, blow, or even a hit to the head. Also, if your spine receives enough physical impact, since it's connected to your head, a concussion can travel up to your head. If you're hit by your head from your head or your spine, your coach may go through a concussion checklist with you. First, they may check your balance. And then they can ask you a few questions that may consist of, do you feel dizzy? Do you have a headache? Do you feel nauseous? Can you see clearly? The way you answer and determine these questions can also help to further the coach's knowledge of whether you may or may not have a concussion, depending on how fast you react to the questions. It's common that you may lose consciousness for a little bit if you hit your head hard enough. If you've been diagnosed with a concussion, it's important to stay away, such as things like TV, texting, reading, loud noises, and bright lights for the first few days. This is because being around things that are loud and bright can increase the chances of getting headaches. And being dizzy is a huge setback when you have a concussion. It's important to not completely eliminate screens, though, but rather use them gradually after the first 48 hours, unless screens and loud noises continuously worsen symptoms. Concussions can last anywhere from 2 weeks to a few months, or even a year. People are able to heal from a concussion within the first 1.5 months to 2 months, but the concussion itself, including symptoms, could take 2 to 3 weeks to heal, and symptoms from a concussion can linger for a few months or, in some cases, years after the initial collision. Concussions can lead to challenging things with your mental health. Being cut off from the world around you, especially if you have to be in a dark and quiet room. It's isolating and can produce anxiety and depression. This could also develop into post-traumatic stress disorder, otherwise known as PTSD. This is because of the experience you're having when you get a concussion. Within the Venn diagram, we can see that traumatic brain injuries, such as concussions, and the overlap of mental health. Athletes should only return to sports after they've been given the okay. This is because if you hit your head again, there's a chance that you could even get brain damage. Whoa, that was a lot of information to take in. Everyone shake your head yes. Shake your head no. Pull it to one side and to the other side. Okay, we're good. Most common athletic injuries. The most common injuries within athletes can include sprains, strains, knee injuries, swollen muscles, as well as Achilles tendon injuries and pain along the shin bones, otherwise known as shin splints. But we can also see rotator cuff injuries, fractures, broken bones, and dislocations. These types of injuries are very common in high-impact sports, such as when you're fighting to get the ball or maybe even colliding with another player. Concussions are also very common in football, hockey, rugby, soccer, and basketball. But this is because there's a lot more room for collision. It's evident that athletes may be more prone to different injuries depending on what sports they do. In this section, I will explore different types of injuries in between ultimate players, soccer players, skiers, and snowboarders. This is because I feel that most people in this room can relate to any of these sports. So, with a raise of hands, let's see how many people play either ultimate, soccer, or they ski or snowboard. That's pretty much all of you. Let's start with all the ultimate players within the audience. Let's start with finding what injuries you guys may find. Can anyone guess some common injuries among ultimate players, or maybe where it's common for ultimate players to get injured? It's their knees, ankles, and shoulders. But with knee injuries come alongside with ankle injuries. These can include muscle sprains, ligament strains, as well as knee ruptures and bursitis. The bursa is a fluid-filled sac around the joints that can help keep the joints moving fluidly. A knee bursitis is when the bursa becomes inflamed. To help understand, you can look at the diagrams on the lower and upper right, which show the difference between a non-inflamed and an inflamed bursa. Shoulder injuries can include instability as a result of a fall. It can also be very easy to get a concussion from a disc which has been lasered at you from a short distance to your head. Raise of hands. Who's been lasered by a disc at them before? If you haven't, it hurts. I promise. Moving on. Now, for all you soccer players out there, let's look at what some common injuries could be for you. Some common injuries within soccer players consist of ankle and knee sprains, calf strains, clavicle fractures, knee bursitis, and you will find more serious injuries can be seen in the players such as midfielders as well as when the team's on defense. This is because you're getting to the ball and you have to play the most defensively. Midfielders have been proven that they're the most prone players to injuries in soccer. This is because they're the players who can commonly get in contact with the ball. How many people in this room ski or snowboard? Yeah, a lot of you. Now, for a second, can anyone think what some common injuries could be? Shout them out. Yep, those all sound right. They can include medial collateral ligaments and anterior cruciate ligament tears. These are further known as the MCL and ACL. Shoulder sprains, fractures, dislocations, and wrist and thumb fractures, head injuries, whiplashes, and concussions can also be found in skiers. Snowboarders have been shown to be a lot more prone to sprains and fractures, as well as contusions and lacerations, dislocations, and concussions. Did anyone guess those? I think you all did. Many of these injuries can be caused by either the terrain, collisions, lifts, falls, and accidents. Okay, after going through those, raise your hand. Does anyone feel a bit on edge knowing what injuries they may likely to get? Well, I can't promise you that you won't get any of these, but I'm sure if you're mindful of your surroundings, you'll be fine. Okay, we've covered the sports section. Now, can anyone tell me how gender plays a role in injuries? Yes, Steph? Yeah, that's exactly. Understanding how gender can affect injuries is extremely important when looking at injuries, especially when you're looking at the prevention and recovery. However, not everyone identifies as female or male. Bodies can come in any combination of these two. This section will use generalizations, as a lot of this world's research has a bias towards a cisgender person. A lot of people may think injury risk is based on personal training or the level of training, but gender can also play a role. Boys' and girls' bodies are structured differently and mature differently, which can impact their potential for injuries. Puberty can also play a key role. This time, the bones are growing and the muscles still have to keep up. This means that during puberty, kids can be more susceptible to get injuries within the growth plates. And we all know that puberty and maturity are really not the same thing. There are many things that can affect why females and males have different reactions to injuries. Some of these things can be influenced by hormones, or even the way the male skeleton is structured is different from the females. It could also be genetics or even different practices. Those are just some of the factors, though, that could influence why females and males get different injuries. Studies have shown that females are more prone to ankle injuries, shin splints, and are 3 times more likely to get their ACL teared. This is because women have wider pelvises, which means their upper thigh bones are angled down, which can angle down more steeply than males. This can create more pressure on the knees. A male's ACL is usually bigger and wider than a female's, but this is because of the way their skeleton structure has evolved. Because this knee injury is found a lot more often in girls. Female athletes are also prone to shoulder injuries because we naturally have less upper body strength, which can create an opening to obtain more rotator cuff injuries. Due to the small bone dimension and lower bone density, females can also tend to be more prone to breaking and fracturing bones. While acute trauma injuries, like concussions and spinal cord injuries, can be seen a lot more in men and males. Now, this could be because there are higher percentages of male athletes playing full impact sports. The increase of the trauma with a raise of hands, how many of these people have had an injury before? Okay. Now, because I know I have. Now, when you were recovering, did you follow the have you had multiple injuries before, though? Yep. Okay. Now, when you were recovering these different injuries, did you follow the same recovery step for each injury? I know I didn't follow the same steps as when I broke my wrist compared to recovering from my knee injuries. Is there a right way to recover? How many different ways of recovery types are there? What can impact recovery? Let's find out. The recovery process can vary for each person, as there are so many injuries within this world. There's no right or wrong way to recover, because there's no recipe book outlining which way to recover after injuries, because there are so many different injuries, as previously stated. Everyone reacts to injuries differently. For example, I'm not going to follow the same recovery steps as someone who's dislocated their shoulder if I've sprained my ankle. When you get injuries, one must not only recover physically, but also recover mentally. There are many different ways you can help yourself recover. For example, via food, rest, physiotherapy, and even talking to a specialist. Let's start with the physical side of recovery. Physical recovery can include physiotherapy, rest, food, and so much more. When you're in the recovery process, it's highly recommended to go to a physio or get some sort of medical treatment. Treatment can help manage pain by mobilizing joints and restoring muscle function. It can also help with further injury prevention, as it can be used to create exercise programs that can help build more muscle within the weaker areas of the body. Mental recovery. It can be very difficult to return mentally to a sport after being injured and out for so long. Being injured can take away the joy that you may feel and replace it with fear and anxiety. It can also contribute to depression as well as PTSD. There are many different ways you can overcome your mental trauma from your injuries, from what your injury has caused. For example, you could talk to someone who could help, like talking to a sports psychologist or even just your friends. You can take care of yourself and your well-being. Ways of taking care of your well-being could be doing anything you enjoy. For me, this could be listening to music, reading, and dancing if I can, or even talking with my friends. But for each different person, it will vary. Food and nutrition. Nutrition plays a huge role in the day-to-day life of an athlete, and it plays an even bigger role when athletes are injured. Different foods can help with different aspects to an athlete's recovery process. For example, foods with high antioxidants, such as spinach, kale, carrots, strawberries, and avocados, they can all help reduce inflammation. While high-quality proteins such as meats, dairy, eggs, fish can all help keep your muscles healthy and reduce any damage caused by exercise. Rest. Now, we must make sure rest is not confused with sleep. Rest is very important for injury and recovery. This is because it allows your body to focus its energy on repairing the damaged tissue. Additionally, rest can help reduce inflammation and pain which can accelerate the recovery process. It's also important to note that too much rest can also lead to muscle atrophy as well as a decrease in range of motion. It can also lead to a decrease in cardiovascular function. This can make it harder to return to normal activities and slow down the recovery process. The amount of rest required will be different for each person, depending on what their injury and what tissue they've damaged is. But what if you go back to sports too soon? What if you injure yourself and this continues? Does anyone know what the cycle could be called? It's called the cycle of injuries. It was a hard cycle to guess, I know. When athletes get injured, it can be very easy for them to fall into an injury cycle. The cycle of injuries is when someone gets injured, and they may sit out for a little bit, but not long enough. Then they jump straight back into their sport, almost at a higher intensity than when they were first injured. When athletes get injured, the most common question is, when can I start playing again? This all depends on the type of injury and how severe it is. Many injuries are worsened when the athlete rejoins their sport too early. In the recovery process, they may feel fine and push themselves before they're fully healed, but then they're at risk of re-injury. The cycle of injuries is very common for athletes to fall into. It's also a very hard cycle to get out of. It can take a lot out of a person, and it's vital that athletes let their bodies repair and listen to what their bodies need before jumping back into sports. A personal example of me falling into the injury cycle is this summer when I injured my hips, where there is from always overloading myself through the dance during the year. But I would always go 100% at practice 3 days a week. We'd have tournaments once a month that would last for 2 days. We'd be playing at a very high intensity, and I wouldn't let myself rest. Or when I would let myself take off maybe 1 or 2 practices, decide that I'm letting my team down, and then jump back in. But how do you make injuries worse? HARM is an acronym that stands for heat, alcohol, running, massage. These are all things that can make the injury worse within the first 48 to 72 hours. Heat is often used during the recovery process to help loosen stiff joints. When you're suddenly injured, though, heat should never be used as an immediate treatment. This is because when you're injured, there's inflammation, otherwise known as swelling, and adding heat will only increase and delay healing. For immediate injuries, ice is the best to be applied quickly to decrease inflammation and swelling. Alcohol. Alcohol can contribute to inflammation as well as muscle loss if you're immobilized. Also, when you're under the influence, you may also not make the right decisions, which, depending on what you're doing, could also lead to you re-injuring or further injuring yourself. Running. If you're running while you're injured, it can create more damage depending on where you're injured. This is because if you're injured on your foot, you're putting more pressure on that injury. Lastly, massage. Like heat, It's used in the recovery process, but can also harm the athlete if used immediately after the injury. This is because massages can encourage circulation and swelling within the injured area. This is what you do not want to do immediately after an injury. Case studies. Case studies are a very good way to learn about different real-life situations. I use case studies in my Masterworks in order to learn more about how injuries impact different people, as well as what the different people did for their recovery process. I interviewed mainly college-age females and one male. This is because of the context that I had. I used case studies to share. I wanted to choose this case study to share because we all know her quite well. She's in our day-to-day lives, and she answered my questions. Her answers to my questions were very insightful and informative. In this case study, I asked the following questions. What injuries did you have? How long were you injured? How long were you unable to play for? Did being injured affect your self-esteem or self-image? When you were injured, how were you able to stay engaged with your team? If so, if you weren't able to stay engaged with your team, what did you do? What was the impact that your injury had on your mental health? Was there any pressure that you felt from anyone to continue playing while injured? What helped your recovery process? Lastly, were there any nutrition factors that you felt maybe impacted your recovery process? Was your career affected by your injury at all? Lastly, when you were able to go back to playing, did you feel more motivated to become a better player? Subject 3 is a 20-year-old female. She has chronic back pain, which the first time this happened to her, she was rock climbing in Australia. This was a normal activity for her. While she was climbing, everything was fine. But on her way home, her back got tighter and tighter. By the time she was home, she could barely walk. She rested for a few days, and everything felt fine again. Guys, that was 6 years ago. Ever since then, it just keeps happening at random times. Most recently, when it goes out, she's usually out for a week or two before her back is mostly fine. She'll give it another week before she goes back to doing activities. It's affected her self-esteem, especially in social relationships, because of what might happen. The activities she's used to do with people, she felt like she could not keep up with them anymore. Quote, "Whatever your sport is, it's such a big part of you and your identity. Having it taken away can replace the joy with anxiety and fear." Quote ended. Losing a part of your identity is such a big factor on your self-esteem. Since the pain was so strong in her back, when it was there, she wasn't able to do any activities. She just needed to rest. Since she had gone so long without her back being checked by professionals, her body learned how to compensate with it in many different ways. Her body learned to move around the injury, ultimately creating many more problems. For example, a tilted pelvis or a locked SI joints. She did feel some pressure to continue on with her sport at first, but when she moved out of West Ontario, she felt like she could not date or hang out with certain people because of how active they were. And doing these activities weren't really a good idea for her. Only in the last year has she been able to put more pressure on herself to try and make her, because she's learned what's normal and what's not. Quote, "It was a long process of understanding that if I do this, it's okay that I may get injured." Quote ended. Gentle stretching and addressing the problem has helped build up new muscle which has really helped subject 3's recovery process. When she was injured, it was mostly just resting and drinking She was drinking a lot of water that helps. Quote, I think not drinking alcohol, it really helps you physically, and I feel like your body repairs faster when you're not drinking alcohol. In terms of how this affects her work, she states, "I think we go to a weird school where we do a lot of activities outdoors as well as other activities. There are definitely times I feel like I'm unable to go to some excursions. My body may not be in a good place to go. So then I have to schedule someone else to go. It's specific to working in our school, but I don't think this causes any issues in any other schools. I put pressure on myself to get better because I know one day Pam and Jen are going to retire and someone will have to step up into their shoes. I'll have to go on the trips with the grade 9s and grade 8s. Woo! So I want to be better so I can step into their shoes. Quote ended. There's always going to be a bit of fear and anxiety around, but she's learned to cope with it. And the fact that if she gets hurt, it's okay. Can anyone guess who this may be? Shout it out. Okay. Injuries can come in all different forms and with different impacts on different people depending on what injuries they have. Through my paper, I've detailed while injuries can be largely categorized as either traumatic or overuse injuries. Injuries can come, when it comes to injuries and their healing, it's really not a one-size-fits-all. Types of sports, lifestyle, gender, genetics, and they can all impact injuries and what athletes get what injuries, as well as a recovery period. If left untreated, injuries can have a negative future consequences on the body's mechanics as well as the mental well-being. Recovery is more than just medical treatment. It's also about ensuring that you have the right nutrition and a varied diet. Rest, but not too much rest, but also make sure your mental health is taken care of. Coaches, peers, family members, and of course medical specialists can all play a key role with helping recovery. Having a full support network can go a long way to helping the athlete heal faster, both mentally and physically. During this research, I've learned how important it is to take note of my body and make sure that I'm listening to my body when it's telling me to rest. I've also learned how important it is to take good care of myself and know my limits, also eating healthy food. Lastly, most important, I think that I've learned that walking it off may not be the best approach. Finally, my thank yous. I would like to acknowledge the people who have helped me get through this journey. I'd first like to thank my classmates. Thank you for letting me speak on and on about different ways of recovery and what they could try for certain injuries. I'm sure you guys got really bored, but you guys never showed it, so thank you. Next, I would like to say a huge thank you to my mom. I don't know where this project, how this project would have turned out without you. Thank you for nagging me to do this even while we were traveling. Thank you for your very honest comments about how to make it better and reading it to make sure it was solid. Thank you to my dad and my brother for listening to me talk for hours on end about this and never telling me to shut up or be quiet. That much, Finn. Thank you to my external advisor, Darcy Musselman. She has guided me through this year-long journey and has given me books to read, as well as it somehow answers my open-ended questions or even the ones I don't know how to phrase. Thank you for the long hours of tedious editing. This project could not have been complete without you. I would like to say a huge thank you to Carrie Marentet. Since grade 6, she's been guiding me if it was on French online or making our cooking videos in grade 7. Even in design, when we would make our dream houses. She doesn't know this, but since grade 6, I knew she was going to be the one to guide me through this year-long process. I cannot express how thankful I am for everything you've done. Thank you for keeping me on track and being super organized about meetings. Almost a little too organized. This project wouldn't have been a clear topic without you, Carrie. But I would like to say my biggest thank you to Jen. Every year, she tells the grade 8s right before summer, think of what you're going to do for your Masterworks. Without failure, I think almost every single person forgets until the day before the camping trip. Now, I think my favorite topic on the hiking trip was, what was my Masterworks going to be? But thanks to Jen and Carrie, I narrowed it down. Thank you for the fun Masterworks parties at lunch and the super silent homerooms. Thank you for the emails over long weekends to keep us on track. And most of all, thank you for supporting us and the trust that you give to us. Lastly, I'd like to thank you and everyone in the audience. I know it's really hard to sit through many of these, but I really hope you guys each learned one thing. So thank you for listening and participating.
Jen, can you put your phone? Eric.
So, Ms. McDonald, that was an incredible presentation. I'm really glad that you had such audience participation because it made it really come alive. And everyone, as it showed, can relate to your topic. So you've enlightened us, and now you get some few questions to enlighten us even more. We're going to start with Carrie.
Excellent job, Ms. McDonald Hewlett. You should feel really proud of yourself. I feel so proud of you. This was a really fun topic and journey to go on with you. And I was secretly hoping ever since grade 6 that you would choose me. We did. I forgot my question.
Dancers think alike, that's all I can say.
Yeah. My question was, do you see yourself, after doing all this research and talking to many different professionals in the field, do you see yourself undertaking some sort of career relating to injuries and athletes? Or?
I mean, a few years ago I really wanted to become a lawyer, but now I really want to become an orthopedic surgeon. And I think that's partly because I got to learn about how joints can affect athletes when they're injured, especially the bigger injuries. And I think I want to help those athletes with the recovery process as well, so maybe taking, going into physiotherapy or taking the degree in kinesiology. I think those are all options for me, but grade 12 is pretty far away, so I'm not entirely sure yet.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That was Miss McDonald. That was lovely. That was amazing. I just want to thank you for bringing me along on the journey. It's been amazing. Miss McDonald had lots of curious questions, rich questions actually. She was always curious about so many things, and I actually didn't think she would be able to put it all together because there was so much that she wanted to cover in so many different areas. And you were able to bring it all together, and I wanted to ask, actually that was one of my questions. She wanted to carry on. But having gone through all of this now and learning about it, I'm curious what specifically you would do differently if you were encountered a traumatic injury or an overuse injury. What would you do differently that you haven't done in the past?
Usually what I like to do is push it off, say I'll be fine, continue playing, and then after practice maybe I'll be like, this really hurts, is there anything I can do about it? But I think from now on, I think I have to learn that when I do something I should check myself, see if I felt like that before and it's just something in my head, or see if it's something that I'm that needs a second to take back and remove myself from the situation to not worsen the injury that I could possibly get if I continued playing or doing any of my sports. But I think just listening to my body, because sometimes I like to shut it down and be like, no, I'd rather play today. So I think just listening to my body.
So listening to your body.
Yeah.
Good. And you commented that you had a hip, a knee, and another injury. Was there another injury that you said too?
Yeah.
I heard wrist. Yes, correct. Are you dealing with any injuries at the moment now?
I mean, my hips are an ongoing thing. I don't know what's going on. There's just something about them that I should probably get checked.
That's what I was thinking. Yes.
But with the hip injury comes knee injuries, and there's something with my knee where the bones on top of each other, so they kind of go like this where the joints meet, which creates a creaking feeling in my body, and it's not really nice.
So maybe something to explore and investigate.
Yeah, that might be something I should take a look into.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Ms. McDonald, a question from me, but also a compliment because you did such a great job. And I was really pleased that in your paper and also in your presentation you brought in the mental health part of recovering from injury. I have noticed that is changing within the sports world, that there's more attention being paid to the mental health of the person that's injured. Why do you think this is?
I think it's because not too long ago, it used to just be focusing on the physical aspect of recovery. And a lot of times this could lead the athlete to maybe think, there's something wrong with me, no one's checking on me, what's going on, this thought of maybe, oh, maybe I won't be able to go back to the same like intensity that I got injured at. And I think that can be very like downgrading as an athlete, because to think that you've worked so hard for this and this one injury has ruined it all, it's a really big impact, especially depending on how long you've done this sport for. And I think it's really important to understand that athletes do have mental health issues, because they're just a human as well, and everyone deals with their things. So I think it's really important to take into perspective that just because someone's physically injured, think about what it could be doing to their mental health, like check in on them, make sure that they're doing okay.
Yeah, I think you're going to put a lot of this into practice, and I hope everyone here does too. Questions from the floor? Jared!
Such a great and comprehensive presentation. Each time I was sitting here thinking, is she going to say something about this? And did it, and then some. So thank you. We all learned something. My question for you is, when we go into a new sport, and I think it was great that you gave us two examples of skiing and all the work together that so many of the students do. But as they go through their educational careers in the university, when they want to try something new, what should they know, or what should they research going into that sport? Anything, or should they just know this all?
I personally think just throwing yourself into it and hoping for the best is the best way to go about when you're joining new things. I mean, why would you look something up and be like, oh, that's intimidating? Like, I think that maybe looking it up is a good idea, because you can see like, oh, like it's common, these are some common things that happen within the sport. And if they affect you, well then if they affect you negatively, then how can you prevent them from affecting you negatively, and just thinking about that. But I really think just throwing yourself out there into the sports world is a really good idea, because joining new sports can be an eye-opener of what maybe you want to do. And I just think throwing yourself into something new is better than to shy back and do a deep analytic research thing on it.
With great confidence. Go ahead, Julia.
Well done, Ms. McDonald, Hewlett. That was a fantastic presentation. What is the worst injury you've seen or you've endured?
Well, my aunt broke her back, which kind of put her out of her basketball career. I didn't watch her break her back or anything, but just hearing her stories about how much fun she used to have playing basketball, and knowing that she's not able to do that anymore, it's it kind of hurts knowing as an athlete that that could happen to me, but seeing it happen to someone in my family is whoa. But I think that's definitely one of the worser injuries, but also concussions, because they really throw you off.
Sure.
I have 3 questions. First of all, congratulations on a very intensive, informative presentation. I listened to every single word you wanted to say. So thank you for covering all. I'm sure everybody here is learning. But what I took away from what you said is that there's a lot more common injuries of overuse in young people.
Mm-hmm.
And from my own observation in this I've seen that a lot of children are now learning to specialize in sport at a very young age, which means that they're using just one set of muscles rather than the whole body, which then may lead to injury.
Yeah.
What would be your advice for parents before they sign up their kids to say, you're so good at soccer? Instead of saying, let's try this and try that and that, so therefore you've got a bit of balance in terms of how your body becomes.
I think for parents, just making sure that maybe you're not forcing your beliefs on your kids, saying, oh, because I did this, I want you to only do this. I think it's really important for kids to get the fuller experience. So maybe instead of just putting them in soccer, you put them in soccer and basketball, or soccer, basketball, and floor hockey. But even though that can be a lot, it's really great for the community that's within the sports world. I think some of my best friends I've made because of sports, but also so they get like the fact that it's not just soccer that's out there. It's more than that, and there's other things that I can do, and I don't have to focus on soccer.
And then my second question is kind of a follow-up to what you said, but you spoke of someone who was a climber.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they got injured and they couldn't do that anymore, they kind of felt a little like I've lost my identity in terms of connecting to my social and doing the thing that I love.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way you think that as a society, in terms of the kind of body of sports, for example, can do to inform people, to sort of be aware of what things can happen so that people can prepare themselves? Because we get into a sport and we love it and we want to work and do it 5 days a week or 6 days a week, but not giving our body enough rest. Is there a way you think that we can be better informed as to how much is too much and when we should actually rest?
Yeah.
Is there a way we can educate people?
I think just sharing personal stories, making sure that like you're heard, because I found within my Masterworks hearing other people's stories was a great way for me to be like, oh, like this could happen, and like it's happened to them, so what are they doing about it? I think just sharing personal experiences is really good, and I'm not saying like always worry about it when you're playing a sport, because like no one really wants to do that, but I'm just saying like be cautious and like making sure that you do know the consequences that could happen, but also knowing how you can make that better, how you can prevent them, and what you can do to maybe prevent those injuries.
And then my last question.
Can I move to a student question? It's okay. Because we have a brother who has a question.
Ms. McDonald, very good presentation. I have 2 questions. If I got hurt very badly and it was only me and you, would you take care of me? Or would
No. You're kind of on your own there, bud. Sorry.
What I thought. Anyways, out of all the sports you have ever played, what has the worst injury that you've ever gotten, and how did you overcome it mentally and physically?
Probably from dance, because it's just always using your muscles, and even though it's like not super like go, it still always has impacts and pressures within the bones. And I think that's also what's caused me hip injuries, which has probably been a really major injury for me. But I think because I'm always using the same muscles within dance, it's usually like turning out my pelvis and making sure everything's like turned out and like nice. I think that's probably what's caused me my hip injuries. Yeah.
Thank you.
Last question, Mr. Whoa, Karen.
Great job, Ms. McDonald. My question, if you feel comfortable sharing, how did your injuries affect your mental health and whatnot? If you feel comfortable.
Okay, it's just, So it's really hard as an athlete to sit out and watch someone do something that you really love, and having maybe your sport like taking away that feeling of joy and excitement and replacing it with fear and like anxiety. So that's really tough, and it's really hard to sometimes overcome. Kind of just have to learn and be like, okay, if I get injured, this is fine. You have to kind of learn like what's okay and what's not okay, and how to feel like how to listening to your body and making sure that your body's like feeling okay with what you're doing. I think mentally what's impacted me is when I had to watch my friends do something that I loved. It was actually like, it was really sad. I felt really left out, and I felt like, especially when it was because it's like team sports such as ultimate, I felt like I wasn't really part of the team. I was isolated, and I think that kind of left me hanging there a bit. And at the end of the at the end of like my recovery process, I was like, do I really want to continue on with Ultimate? Like, I don't feel part of the team. What's the point of me continuing on with this?
Thank you.
And the final question for sure has to come from Mike.
Oh goodness.
So, hypothetically speaking, if you had a friend who was 14 and injured, would you advise them to eat Nutella or vegetables to get better?
Oh, that's a really hard question, actually. Gosh. Well, mentally, I think the sweeter choice is probably going to help you feel better. Like, but if you're taking into, like, is this smart, is it not smart, I think you should probably go for the fruits and veggies because in the end of the day, the apples keep the doctors away.
Everyone heard it.
That's good. Strawberries dipped in, like, any sort of sweet thing, I